Should negative gearing be axed? Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian.Heise here, and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. I have my stein of coffee, and I thought we'd have a look at this article discussing the prospect of getting rid of negative gearing. Now, if you're unaware, negative gearing is what, well, a significant number of Australians use to minimize their tax burden. Essentially, you invest in a property, and then any loss you make on that property you can write off or claim against other income. So you have a job, you make some decent income there, but you're paying way too much tax. So you can buy an investment property, intentionally make a loss on it, and write that off. Now, there's a few arguments made in favor of negative gearing. People believe it reduces rent, but that's only one side of the argument. There's a few things to consider, because Labor went to the polls wanting to slash negative gearing for everything but the older generations. They weren't going to grandfather it in for the older properties. Funny that, isn't it? I was quite a little frustrated with that policy because it removed an opportunity to reduce tax for future generations that the older generations had enjoyed. A little bit unfair, isn't it? Of course, it didn't go through. You know why? Because a significant portion of Australia's wealth is tied into negative gearing. Now, I've been dwelling on negative gearing for a while, and I've come to the point where I'm no longer a fan of it. Now, I hate taxes, and I am, quite supportive of methods to reduce taxation. I think government should cut its services and really scale back. That's my position and my bias. So then you might ask yourself, why is Florian coming out against negative gearing, or why isn't he in favor of it? Well, one particular reason, because it creates an incentive for people to invest in property. Now, you may think that's good. But what happens? Well, one, you have more and more people investing in property. You've got more and more people competing to buy property as a method of offsetting the tax. So it's another pressure on the price of property. It inflates the cost of it. Now, another reason to inflate the cost is, well, that will also drive up rents. Even though people want to make a loss, they still want to not make too much of a loss. So if, making a loss on a $500,000 house is a little different to making a loss on a $200,000 house. So we get these two issues. It puts additional pressure onto the property market because more people are investing in it, more competition, particularly for the lower grade properties that first homeowners go into. We're hearing it all the time. Now, here's the other issue. That money, because remember, this is you can't get the same negative gearing benefits with other investments. You can't make a loss on your shares. You can only, if you make a loss on the shares, and this is my understanding, you claim that against the capital growth of other investments in that category. Correct me if I'm wrong, everyone, but that's what I looked up recently. So, for me, it worked. I made a loss on some share investments, but then I could claim it against a property capital growth. Nothing wrong with that, but I couldn't claim it against my other income, could I? On a weekly basis to offset the tax. It's a little different. And what this encourages is people to invest in property rather than other parts of the economy. So it means we get a messy situation now where we have, well, let's see, very high property prices. And I'd argue that's also fueled by foreign investment, but this is a big component of it. And then you have a big portion of our civilization's wealth tied into property. Because, well, there are a lot of people that just have either a job, working for government, working for an organization, that make decent income, and they need to find a way to minimize their tax. And this is a very effective way they can do it. And I do not discourage, or I'm not angry at anyone who's taken advantage of this situation. I completely understand why. But now there's discussions of removing it. And we'll go through the article in a moment. But one thing I would like to put on the table is if we remove it, perhaps it should be a phased process for everyone. Even all the boomers that have their 5 houses, or the younger generations that have got their 6 houses, or some people have 30 houses. Remove it gradually, because then, well, the demand for these properties will decrease, the price will go down, I know people don't like that, so don't think, if rents will skyrocket if we get rid of negative gearing, Florian. Well, no, it won't. It won't initially. It might initially, but it'll even out. But also another thing will happen. Demand for these properties will go down because people can't use them to mitigate their tax anymore. So then if demand goes down for these properties, they'll become more affordable to the people who are paying quite high rents at the moment. Then they may be able to enter the market. What do you think? Do you think that could happen? But then also you'd have people investing in other things. But here's the argument I'd also add to this. If we're going to phase out negative gearing, let's also reduce our income tax to line up so the government doesn't suddenly get all this influx of money that they don't get now. What if the tax-free threshold was shot up? What if people earning $200,000 were paying a lot less tax, only 30%? That's what we could do. That's what I would encourage the government to investigate, rather than just simply use this mechanism to prop up one particular industry. Investigate the implications of cutting it across the board. Well, guys, let me know your opinions on that, because my perspective has changed. Because I'm more and more I've looked into it, I'm starting to see it's just another government intervention in the market that is leading to a bubble. So let's have a look, guys. Let's see what Domain are telling us about this position. So all reforms are on the table post-pandemic crisis. So what of negative gearing? I mean, it's going to be tough to sell. It is going to be a tough one to sell, getting rid of, because so many people have it. So many politicians have it. So many viewers have it. Everyone has it. Lots of people use it. And we'll look at another article that just showed the numbers. But if you're going to take this off people, I'd say gradually and make it across the board. Don't lock off a new generation from doing it. So in the post-pandemic economy, all options are on the table to get people back in jobs and to build a better world, we're told. Really? Well, okay. Reforms to one housing tax is already in the spotlight, stamp duty. But what are the proposals to change negative gearing and capital gains tax that have been out of mind since the federal election? This time a year ago, Labor appeared poised to win power and restrict tax incentives for negative gearing to new builds only, while grandfathering existing arrangements. So there you go. That's bloody unfair, isn't it? I mean, sure, people can do it for new builds only, but that's going to cause the same problem. Halving the capital gains tax discount was also policy, although the party later flagged a shift to a new policy agenda. At the time, house prices were falling in the wake of the bank's regulators crackdown on interest-only loans, and both buyers and sellers were hesitant to make decisions before the election result was clear. After the election, a loosening of housing credit and cuts to interest rates, housing prices bounced before slowing more recently amid the health crisis, and it's the direction of price movements that would be key in any further consideration of the reform. The Grant Institute's Brendan Coates last year called policies worthwhile reforms that would generate substantial revenue for the budget. Something that was always a good idea is still a good idea in the post-COVID world. The organization's household finance program director says now, we've got a long way to go in just responding to the pandemic before politicians and governments will turn their minds to some of these questions. But certainly in the long run, there's going to be a need to address the increased public debt that's come about a result of the pandemic. See, here's the thing. They're talking about just getting rid of it and having us pay more tax. That's the issue. That's what I'm against. I would rather have negative gearing than get rid of it and pay more tax, because they need to ensure that their revenue stays the same if they're going to remove this to get any market benefits to it. But maybe they're just not capable of that, guys. They just want to tax us. Maybe someone should leave in the comments just the list of all of the taxes that we pay. People don't actually realize how much tax we pay on everything. Petrol, cigarettes, all these things. It's just ludicrous. Ludicrous. Changes to the tax concessions for negative gearing and capital gains tax remain one of the more attractive ways to achieve budget repair. because they didn't impose large costs on the economy or have a big impact on house prices, he said. Really? Really? Doesn't he think negative gearing has an effect on the demand for investment properties? Aren't investors the ones competing with first home buyers? Am I mistaken in that assumption? Isn't that what we're being told? It's very hard to introduce policies like this at a time when prices are falling, he said. It's a harder political sell. UNSW Business School professor Richard Holden, who wrote a report that became the basis of the policy, initially estimated the concessions to investors were costing the budget bottom line $6 billion a year or even more. Well, there you go. Let's just take, $6 billion a year. Let's up all of the tax threshold. You know what? Let's just up the tax-free threshold. So there's $6 billion less per year in revenue generated. Simple. And then phase out negative gearing over time. Everyone will get that benefit. Everyone will get the same benefit. Now, the longer run impact of the tax break remained, he said. But in the immediate context, even the policy's architect cautions against a quick change. It depends on how bad the dislocation is in the residential property market. But if it's as bad as many people fear, you wouldn't want to do it right away. There's a whole lot of economic circumstances where you should go ahead with this reform. In the present circumstances, I don't think it would be advisable. As for budget repair, he suggested low-cost government borrowing to help the economy to be able to grow again will be more important than focusing on having a deficit. Or how about we reduce government? How about we scale back government? How about we look at scaling back the burden on people? This is why people are doing this, because they are taxed to the hilt. Okay, if you remove the tax burden, you need to remove this counterplay to it. You're taking with one hand and giving back with the other. It's ludicrous. And there's inefficiencies everywhere. But, logic doesn't seem to be a part of the process, or simplification doesn't seem to be a part of it, does it? KPMG Australia Chief Economist Brendan Ryan last year called the policies sound, adding their introduction would need to be managed carefully. Now he says changing the tax concessions to limit negative gearing benefits to new builds in the current environment could offer a boost to the construction sector, or although it would make sense for it to be only one part of the mix. How about people are allowed to write off the cost of their primary residence? Shouldn't that be more important? Just think about it. If you could write off the interest that you pay on your home. Because right now, you have to pay the tax man before you pay to provide a roof for your family. Does that seem fair, everyone? The government takes a slice of your wealth, of your hard work, to piss away on their numerous programs, which some have no success of achieving, and before you put a house for your family. That was a policy that Palmer put forward. No one else is talking about it very much. So what it was doing was incentivizing new construction activity. And again, that's a good thing in a post-pandemic environment. It is something that could get thrown into the mix of tax reform. However, I think there are other taxes that are much more inefficient in the way they run and should be looked at first. Stamp duty, for example, which has already been flagged by the two largest states as a possible reform candidate. A small land tax paid each year would allow people to move home more easily than a larger stamp duty bill each time someone transacts, the argument goes. How about we get rid of both? I don't want to pay a land tax. I don't want to have another yearly tax. How about we look at the programs that are making no success? Reduce the burden on people. See, this is the thing. They're not actually contemplating removing a tax and reducing a burden. They just want to shuffle things around and be more efficient in how they rob you. He also argues that tax reform should be undertaken to have an optimal tax system, not just because we're facing a crisis. One thing we have to be really careful of is that we don't make quick decisions around things like austerity measures. Domain economist Trent Wilshire agreed the policies might be one relatively small element of an overall change to the tax mix, but said it would be more likely to gain support when house prices were rising. It's not a bad policy in terms of the economics, he said. This change is more likely to occur in a time of rising house prices when concerns about housing affordability are top of the agenda. Even the concept of whether you need to do budget repair is debatable. If the economy is going to be very weak for the next couple of years, the budget needs to be in deficit, and the government needs to spend money, not increasing taxes. Okay, so here you go. I mean, they're just talking about shifting around how they take your money, pretty much, and grandfathering all of their own benefits in. So it'll only be the new generations that won't have the same opportunity to take advantage for it. So let's have a look. This is an article from The Age, and it just has some numbers over who is using it. So the occupations most likely to use negative gearing. So you can see here, police between 20 and anesthesiast over 25, nearly 30. Surgeons, internal medicine specialists, school principals. I'm surprised. I mean, they earn good money, school principals. They earn pretty good money. Mine engineer, senior non-commissioned defense force officer, psychiatrist, commissioned officer, air transport professionals, engineering manager, other building or engineering technician, and police. So there you go. Look at how many people are using it. The percentage of people who negative gear in each tax bracket. Well, there you go. It's because the 180,000, of course, they're going to be the most using it because they got the most benefit of it because they pay more tax than everyone else, guys. This is the thing. So, guys, there we have it. I mean, you know, the average income deductions of taxpayers, you know, salary, people who list the income source. I mean, you can see here what they're claiming. And I'll link to this article if you want to go through it in greater detail. But a large portion of people are using it. You know, even down to $18,000, guys. 6%. And then 18 to 37, 4.5%. So, you can't say it's just the wealthy taking advantage of this. But I would argue, once again, if we do it, all of this money that's being written off, maybe we need to shift up that tax-free threshold, everyone, rather than just taxing us again. Anyway, I know this is a controversial topic. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on it. What would you do? Keep it all to status quo? Or would you want more government services? And be happy to pay a land tax. As always, thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe to the channel. If you're a fan and want to support us, there are a few ways you can. You can join us on YouTube or Patreon. You can support us via our affiliate links at Amazon or eBay or Independent Reserve or Kucoin. You can buy our merch from HeiseSays, use Gold Pass from Perth Mint, or support us via PayPal. Take care, everyone. I'll see you in the next episode.